The biggest time sink for video editors is sitting there, staring at the timeline and banging your head against the wall trying to come up with an idea for an animation. I've been there myself many times throughout the 4 years of editing videos, but honestly, in the past year or so, I pretty much never get these creative blocks and I'm able to come up with ideas for animations instantly. The craziest part is that throughout this year, my income actually skyrocketed, not only because I'm able to get videos done faster, because I'm not sitting there staring at the timeline trying to come up with ideas for animations, but also the level of my editing, the quality of the videos that I'm editing actually went up while spending less time. See, the bad solution in that situation where you're sitting there and you have a creative block would be to think something like, okay, I can't come up with ideas for animations for this video, so it must be my client's fault. The video isn't even that good, so let me just put some random animations throughout the video to make it seem like the video is worth the money that the client paid me. In that scenario, you're not gonna make progress, you'll definitely not make the video better, and because of that, you'll never reach 5 to 10K per month. But if you implement the 3 strategies I'm about to share in this video, you'll never have creative blocks again. You'll always know where to put animations in your videos. And the first strategy, the biggest sauce, I don't want it to put off until the last point in the video, don't look at the phrase in a vacuum. So I see this mistake with editors so frequently. It's probably the most common mistakes I see editors make in general, because it comes from that specific mindset where you're sitting there, you haven't had an animation in your video for a minute or two, and you're thinking to yourself, oh shit, I'm definitely gonna get revisions here if the client sees this because I haven't had an animation for a minute or two. So you panic, you try to create an animation, and what happens is you just look at that specific phrase that you're trying to create an animation, or maybe even a specific word in a vacuum. You don't see the big picture, you don't see the video as a whole, which is really the key when it comes to overcoming these creative blocks. If you see the big picture of the video, the animation ideas are actually gonna be very obvious, because what's gonna happen, you're gonna be looking at the video exactly how you should from the viewer's perspective. See, the whole idea of creating animations is to make the video make more sense to the viewer. And what happens when you don't look at this specific phrase in a vacuum? Instead, you actually keep in mind what already has happened in the video or what's gonna happen in the video later. You're keeping in mind this context, and then with your animation, it just becomes obvious what to show to make the video either make more sense or to make the video more enjoyable or to spike curiosity in the viewer, because you're gonna sort of like remind them what happened earlier in the video or what's gonna happen later in the video. So you're not necessarily sitting there and thinking, how can I add an extra animation to make the video worth the client's money? Instead, you're literally thinking about how can I make the video better? Because honestly, sometimes the animations aren't even needed. For emotional moments or for when just the story is being told, it is fine to show the A-roll, because for those sections, usually there is no extra context needed that's gonna make the video better for the viewer. But you're only gonna know this when you start seeing your videos from the viewer's perspective. You're literally gonna imagine yourself in viewers' shoes, what they want to get out of the video, so why they even clicked on the video, what's the rough title and the thumbnail, then what have they already seen up until this point in the video. And with all that context in mind, the animation ideas are just gonna be coming to you like that, because it is insanely obvious. And the biggest tip I have here is to just simplify everything as much as possible. Complex is not good. I'm not sure if you heard this phrase of Steve Jobs, but he said something like, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And this really works in all areas of life. Usually how it happens when you have this first idea for anything, whether that's an animation or whatever else, like for example, a text that you want to send to somebody, an email, it's gonna be this complex ass thing that's gonna have a bunch of stuff, and you're basically gonna just brain dump everything there, right? And it takes some extra time to simplify it, for it to still make sense and for it to still add as much context as needed for the viewer, without adding all the extra unnecessary stuff. See, that's a skill on itself, and it works really well because we as humans, we are sort of inherently lazy. We're trying to spend as little brain power as possible everywhere, especially when we're consuming content in our spare time. So if you start asking yourself questions, how can I simplify this? Or does this scene have unnecessary elements that I can just remove and the scene is still gonna make sense? Asking questions like that to yourself is a really good thing to do, because after an iteration of two, your animation is gonna be simplified by a lot, and it's gonna make the video way cleaner and way easier to understand for the viewer, which is the ultimate goal here. Another really good tip I have here, it also sort of tied to making everything as simple as possible, is to actually show things exactly how they happened. Because from personally my experience, when you show things exactly how they happened, when you're not making things up, that's actually the simplest way to show it, and that's the way where it's gonna make the most sense. So to just give you an example to make this a bit easier to understand, imagine that someone in the video is talking about buying a book. It literally takes you very little time as an editor to go on Amazon.com, search up that book, and screen record yourself clicking the buy button. But it's gonna tell the story perfectly, because this is exactly what happens in real life. And if you make that animation, if you make that graphic, if you show that B-roll, it's gonna add all the context needed to the viewer, and the video is gonna make a lot of sense. Another good use case of this, which is tied with what I was talking about earlier, where you grab some stuff from earlier in the video or from later in the video, is very often in videos, creators would, like I said, refer to things either from earlier in the video or from later in the video. And all you can do as a video editor is to literally just show that exact thing. Either show it from later in the video in the way where you're teasing it, you're not showing the full thing, you're just showing the viewer what's coming, or you can just bring up the same exact thing you showed earlier in the video, and that's gonna add all the context needed to the viewer, because remember, we're not looking at this phrase in vacuum that you're trying to create an animation for. The viewer has already watched the full video up until that point, so if you bring up something from earlier in the video, it's gonna make perfect sense for the viewer, and it's gonna follow this exact rule of show the actual thing instead of making it up. And the last strategy I want to share with you when it comes to overcoming creative blocks is to honestly switch niches. So I had a call with an editor a couple of weeks ago, and he told me this thing that, yeah, he's basically editing in this niche, but he doesn't really enjoy the content that he's editing, but he thought that it's what it takes, like this discipline to, showing up every single day, persevering, editing stuff you don't like, going through hardship to actually make it as a video editor, which I don't think that's a sustainable path at all. Personally, my biggest thing always was to edit the content I actually enjoy editing. That's how I was able to never burn out. And on top of that, this is huge when it comes to coming up with ideas for your animations, because when you're editing the content you really enjoy, that means you're the target audience of this type of content, and that means that you would watch it for free, and that means that you're literally the viewer. So this whole thing, the whole video that we were talking about, adding context to the viewer and making the video more understandable and make it make more sense instead of trying to show off, all of those things are going to be so much easier to do for you as an editor. I should have mentioned this earlier, but if you stick this long throughout the video, you're just going to get more sauce, which is, props to you. But you should actually listen to what's being said in the video, because without listening and without trying to understand what the video is about, without trying to understand the points that creator is making, you just won't be able to add extra context to the viewer with your animations. And listening to the creator, listening to what the video is about, becomes so much easier. First of all, when you're working not with a douchebag whose videos are very boring, but also it becomes so much easier when you are the target audience of the video and you're passionate about what's being talked about in the video. And sure enough, after that call with that editor, he literally messaged me yesterday that he landed 2 new clients in the niche that he tried to transition out of. So how it was is he had this one niche that he really liked editing in, but he thought he's gonna make more money in a different niche, and that made him pursue this niche instead that he wasn't passionate about at all. And after the call, he just realized, okay, I basically need to focus on this niche because I can make it work anyway. In pretty much every single niche, you can get to 5 to 10K per month if you become one of the best editors there. And he landed 2 new clients in just a couple of weeks. And obviously all of his creative blocks disappeared because I can just imagine how draining it is to be editing content you couldn't care less about, just for this, idea that, first of all, discipline, I have to persevere and all of that, but also the idea of there is more money in that niche. Honestly, even if that's technically true, you're still gonna make so much more progress while editing for the niche that's technically less lucrative or something like that, but that you actually enjoy editing in. If you want my personal help when it comes to scaling to 5 to 10K per month, go ahead and click the first link in the description, fill out the application there, and based on your answers, it's gonna give you the exact thing that's right in your specific situation. Thanks for watching, hope you got value out of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.